Joining me now by Skype is Gabor Lukacs. He's the founder of the advocacy group Air Passenger Rights. Good to see you.
Good afternoon.
So I know you're not in the country, but you're following along because this is very important to you. What is your reaction to the legislation and what you've been reading today? Is it enough?
I'm profoundly disappointed by what has been presented. It is smoke, mirrors, and no teeth. This legislation could have been written by Air Canada's CEO.
Why do you say that?
The bill has no teeth whatsoever, and to a great extent, it preserves the status quo. It provides no enforcement mechanism and no consequences for the airlines for breaking the law. It tasks the Canadian Transportation Agency with developing what the regulations should actually say and with enforcing them. The very body which over the past 4 years has proven to be unwilling or incapable of enforcing our rights, and which is in bed with the industry. The Canadian Transportation Agency has serious integrity issues and impartiality issues. The very body which is supposed to adjudicate disputes between passengers and airlines cannot make a statement that the agency made claiming that Canadian airlines are among the best in the world.
So what would you like to see them do? I guess you would like them to not have given the ability to regulate this legislation through this agency. Where would have been a better place to put it?
The scope of the air passenger bill should have been right in the legislation. The amounts, the actual compensation amount should have been developed by Transport Canada, and the enforcement should have been left to a specialized enforcement body which has a mandate which compels the body to enforce the law, the same way that the police has some obligation toward the citizens. The way it currently reads is that the agency may enforce the law if it wants to do so. There are no any provisions in this bill that would actually mandate the Canadian Transportation Agency to issue fines to airlines that break the law. And the experience of the past 3-4 years show that they don't take enforcement actions. The complaints have remained steady, but statistical data released in the agency's report shows that the actual number of enforcement actions have dropped fourfold.
But if there is legislation, and again, I understand that it's going to be the agency that will come up with the regulation, but if there's broad legislation that says no more bumping, you can't deny boarding, you have to give compensation for things like overbooking, won't that require enforcement because the public will now expect it? Won't there be some of the onus sort of be on the agency to come through finally because now there's legislation and this is what the Canadian public will expect?
I don't think so. Many of the rights that they are trying to present to us as new rights have already existed on the law books in the Carriage by Air Act. The Canadian Transportation Agency has all the means and tools to enforce the Carriage by Air Act through its regulatory powers. It failed to do so in the past, and I see no reason why it would do so now.
And why would the government have not given more teeth or more clarity around what they expect from the regulations, do you think?
The current government is maintaining an unhealthily good relationship with the airlines, in particular with Air Canada. This bill is very much to the satisfaction of Air Canada, as indeed the CEO of Air Canada stated to the press a few weeks ago. So there is simply no interest in actually changing the situation. What they are doing is just some show, some facade to pretend that this issue is going to be addressed.
What about the fact that they are increasing the allowance for international ownership of Canadian airlines? That seems to me like a move in the right direction, because if there's more competition in the marketplace, perhaps governments are not, as you suggest, compelled to try and please the few that we have.
The problem is that we have a race to the bottom. When you have a new entrant, it will have to compete with them about how to deceive the public even more, not about how to be more effective, because the minimum standards that already exist on a paper or that may be added in the future are not being enforced. Until such time that airlines will begin to receive fines to the tunes of millions of dollars, which the agency could issue, but it does not, And what you have seen happen in the US, airlines are not going to change. They may change the style, may add nicer communication, some fancy language, but the underlying substance is not going to change.
So let me end on this. Why should the government be involved in this? Why can this not be free market, consumer controlled? If an air company treats me badly, I don't go back to them. Why do you need the government to be there as a protection for the consumer?
If an airline treats you poorly, you go to another airline which treats you poorly. Although there may be competition in firms and names, in practice, when it comes to poor treatment of passengers, all airlines seem to be agreeing to some degree that passengers are worthless and should be treated poorly, to put things with some exaggeration. So when you have no real competition in terms of how passengers are treated, you cannot solve it with more fake competition. The only time the competition can be helpful is where a competitor can actually make more profit by obeying the law. Let's take a very simple example. If you could run a business in Canada without paying taxes, you would be more successful than other businesses because you would have more profit. If the government allows businesses to operate this way, a new entrant cannot make a profit by being law-abiding. It is forced to not pay taxes too, because otherwise it is going to have smaller profit than the others. The same thing is happening with the airlines.
So what would you say to the transport minister then, who announced this, and presented it as something that was going to help Canadians? What would you say to him today about what is really needed?
I think he should resign. He has proven incompetence, inability to protect the public. He is trying to present rights that are already on the law books as some kind of new rights. I would suggest that he go to the Library of Parliament, open up the Carriage by Air Act, look at Schedule 6, look at Article 19, Article 17, 26, and ponder over them.
Okay. Gabor Lukács, thank you for your perspective tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.